Hello and welcome to this instalment of Write Your Future, where we bring you professional writing tips and advice to help you with the competition. My name's Ruth and I'm one of the co-founders of LLA, and today I have been speaking to Zoe Lambert, who is a wonderful writer and creative writing lecturer here at Lancaster University. So let's see what she had to say.
Hello, my name's Zoe Lambert and I'm a writer and lecturer at Lancaster University, and my specialism is short stories, and I write and I also teach short stories at undergraduate and at MA level as well.
Excellent. Do you want to talk a little bit about your publications as well?
Yeah, so I've been publishing short stories for quite a long time, and I've published a lot with different independent presses around the UK, and a lot with a particular press in Manchester called Comma Press, who are really brilliant and exciting independent publishers. And a lot of my stories, I have sort of two areas I write about, and one was which I don't explore as much these days, which is in my collection, The War Tour. So these were stories partly about refugees and people fleeing war, but they were put next to where war becomes a kind of tourism industry. And so we kind of come from the UK and consume the history as part of a holiday. And so these different stories were put next to each other to kind of show that contrast of and also our complicity as well. Yeah. And then my other area which I've been writing a bit more about, is around caring and illness and disability. So, and this comes from much more personal experiences and around the challenges of care. And I've done work with young carers as well and helped develop their writing. And so that's what I'm doing a bit more I'm writing about at the moment.
Did you ever enter any competitions kind of early in your career, and did they help at all?
Yeah, I did. I entered lots of small competitions. Mm-hmm. I think they're really useful, and I think it's just really good to get your work out. So I entered quite a lot when I was younger, little competitions, and but also sending work out as well to journals, anthologies, seeing what's out there, getting involved and finding out about the literary communities is all really good, important part of writing. And this is my cat, by the way, to the people watching. She's well known on my Zoom calls.
Do you have any advice for writers looking to kind of work within the word count and that kind of challenge?
So the thing with short stories, it's not about cramming a long story into a short space. So if you've got an idea and it's lots and lots of different things happen, and that's not a short story. And just summarising that long story within the word count isn't going to work 99% of the times. Occasionally a writer might do that and it works, but I wouldn't advise it. And so it's better to explore a story that happens through a single event or moment of change, and focus around that and work on showing that rather than cramming lots and lots in. Yeah, and it's also good to get your draft down and then leave it and come back, read it aloud, share with a friend, and to read and get a reader's perspective, because that's the important thing. Is whenever we write, we want to communicate. It's an act of communication, and you need to get that feedback from a reader to know if you've communicated what's in your head and in your imagination and in your soul. Has that got on the paper in the way you imagined it has? So get some feedback, and then just edit very carefully. And sometimes it takes a few goes to get that editing, just to give yourself a little bit of time. I don't think you can really write literature at the last minute. You can, but you don't have much time to edit.
Why do you think that self-reflection is so important in writing, and how does that inform the process?
I think a notebook where you're jotting down ideas, you're thinking about what you're doing, you're just writing it all down is really useful. Just getting the thoughts in your head onto the page. And I have about 50 notebooks in my office going back a long, long time. And so writing, journaling, reflecting, all those forms of writing have always been really important part of my creative process. So I wasn't even thinking on reflecting now. I was just writing down ideas and going, will this work or not? And it's almost like I don't have a proper thought until I get it on the page.
How long do you spend researching before beginning a book?
I've done quite a lot of written a lot of stories that are historical, and involve quite a lot of research. And I don't think there's like a sort of a golden guidebook on how much to do first before you start. And usually I have an idea, and it would come, obviously if it's historical, it's come from something I found out and learnt about, and that process will be gradual. And so I think you've got to both find out enough, but then not get swamped in it as well. But I think if for short stories, what's really great about stories that are researched is that they're not telling everything. It's not everything about a certain piece of history. It's just one little story. And some of those stories I've written were commissioned. So I worked with historians, I've worked with scientists, and that's been a really amazing process, because you can just pick their brains, and that working together has helped develop some of the more in-depth stories. For example, I wrote one about Lise Meitner, who's Austrian physicist, and this was one of those commissions. And she lived in Berlin in the Second World War, and she was Jewish, and she was still in Berlin till 1939, when she was until 1938, when Austria was annexed, and she was escaped from Germany by the help of all these other scientists, and lived in Stockholm and carried on working by overnight mail with her Otto Hahns, her partner chemist. And this research was groundbreaking. It changed history. So that I worked with a historian about that. So I did a lot of research into telling her story, but really it was her voice, her letters, and apart from the research, imagining this amazing woman who did all this under the most unbelievable circumstances. So yeah, I think I think for everything we write about, it's good to find out. We don't know everything, so always do research, talk to people. There's lots of kinds of research from reading books, but also observational research, looking, watching, seeing, taking note of the world around you, just hearing voices, watching what people do. I mean, that's half the research you do as a writer, is being a watcher of humanity. So that's as much, I think, important research as, for example, finding out the facts of the Second World War and what happened to the scientists when they fled Germany.
Both War Tour and Stories of Uprising tackle quite difficult and often highly political themes. So why do you think kind of that political side or that kind of social side is so important in creative writing?
It's always been about part of how I engage with the world, with society around me. Writing about it has been also about learning about it, and that those stories, they're part of a dialogue, and the recent story in Resist is really interesting because that's part of an anthology of stories about history of resistance, so people, the common people making change, right back all the way back from Boudicca to the recent protests after Grenfell. It's ordinary people and how they changed history, not just, when we're at school, we just learn about the kings, we're Henry VIII again, Anne Boleyn, But there's also another social history. So being part in the projects that are writing that and creating that history I think has been really important for me, because if they're not written and part of that dialogue, they get forgotten. And every time there's a story, it becomes part of an ongoing conversation. I mean, but on the other hand, I don't do it lightly. I think when you approach these subjects, you have to do it with care and awareness of your own position, your own privilege in relation to the subject matter. So part of, for example, what we teach at Lancaster is ethics and writing. So I've had to think carefully about the way I write those stories and how much I tell and what right I have to tell them.
What advice would you give to young writers thinking of entering the competition?
Even if they've not started, then I advise them to start building up a writing practice. So a little bit every day or every few days, so that you're not only writing that, but you're doing writing outside of it, because writing's like a muscle. It's like learning an instrument. You don't just pick up an instrument and go, oh, I'll just play this trombone one go and that'll be great. You need to practice and get going in your writing. So if you're entering, start writing. If you start in a journal or notebook or on your phone, whatever works, and then build that practice up, so that when you have a go at the prompts and start writing it, you've already got a rhythm and a flow going with and a fluency with how you write. And the other thing I advise is do your best to show and not tell. So not saying that if you're in the poem or in your piece of writing that someone's sad, show the sadness, show how it feels in your own body, show what that means, and use lots of specific telling detail in any of your work, and that always makes it much more vibrant. Enjoy the challenge and the process of writing it and working towards the deadline. I think just doing that is a real achievement, and that's what I think is courageous and should be applauded.